Hello. Good morning. Good morning. How is everybody? You're still enjoying your MAGFest? I can hear it now. Some of y'all drunk a little bit too much last night, probably. It's all good. Well, first and foremost, thank you all for being here. Greatly appreciated. I forgot to put my name on the actual flyer, so it's fine. But my name is Javon Goard. I am a video game researcher as well as a PhD student at Johns Hopkins University. And I am so excited to have these two astute gentlemen here with me. I am so pumped up. We're going to get into esports, but in particularly the intersections of esports within academic institutions. You know, it's been really proliferation of esports programs for the past decade now, starting off at smaller institutions, and now we're talking about huge institutions such as the University of Maryland College Park and Grand Canyon University. And so here's going to just be an open conversation thinking through and around what this actually means, not only in the interim, but also long-term goals for both, not just institutions, but for the students who are actually a part of these particular esports programs. And of course, we want you all to engage with us as well, so there will be a time for Q&A. I think that's pretty much it. Does this sound good to you all? Is this fair to you all? All right, cool beans. Let's get this show started. So I'm going to start off with my right. So if you can all give a warm welcome to Director of Esports at the University of Maryland College Park, my alma mater, go Terps, Sergio Brack. Sergio, can you give a few words to the people?
Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I'm always humble when I see so many people that care about scholastic esports. I know oftentimes we get seen as sort of an afterthought to a lot of people involved in professional and tier 2, but I think the work we do as students, as educators is very, very important. So I really do appreciate so many of you being out here. Thank you so much.
All right, and last but not least, I met this man in Kentucky, and we had a great time. We talked about so many things there. We talked about things, and we did things that we can't actually publicly say. Let me stop. But can you give a warm welcome to my friend and colleague at Grand Canyon University, Director of Esports Operations, DeShong.
Just like to echo the same things that Sergio said. Thank you all for being here and being willing to listen to us talk about something that we're crazy about. For those of you who don't know, Sergio and I have been doing this since we were 18, 19 years old. We're both 24, 25 now in the world of college esports. So thank you all for listening or coming today and being willing to listen to us talk about something that we should really shut up about.
Fantastic. So I just have a list of questions here. More than likely, we will diverge. Okay, this is not a contract by all means. So these are just some guiding thoughts. But before I start out with these questions, just give the audience a sense of how the hell did you even get to this position that you're in, right? Like, how did you end up convincing universities to actually do or like create esports programs? So Sergio, can you start us off?
I think the answer for me is always the same, not just because I have some in the crowd right now, but genuinely the students. I think no matter what institution I've been at in this particular role, whether as a student or as a director, the students always drove the passion behind esports, and is the only reason there's esports programs at these universities. I think a prime example of that is what's happening at my alma mater, which is Ole Miss right now, right? We went in there and we started working on a student-led organization for 4 to 5 years, and now they have a full-fledged esports director. They have a full-fledged facility and things of that nature. So I genuinely don't think I'd be in the position I'm in today at UMD if it wasn't for the students, working, tirelessly to get administration's attention, knocking on doors, reaching out to donors, when they probably shouldn't, and things like that, right? So definitely the students is the make or break for these positions, and I don't think myself or Jay would be up here if it wasn't for the work that the students put in our respective institutions.
Thank you. Jay, what about you?
Yeah, to kind of piggyback and echo what Sergio was saying, I think a lot of what gaming esports is on campuses like Grand Canyons, Maryland's, Mississippi State's, and Ole Miss's is a home for students that are typically forgotten about, right? So I know when I was at Mississippi State and I grew up playing baseball, basketball, football, right? I might go to the football game, but I very quickly found out that if I don't go to the football game, the university didn't necessarily care if I was being engaged or not, right? Whether it was through the tailgate or going to the football, basketball game, or doing something that was sports related. I found that if you didn't do those things, you were typically forgotten about. And gaming esports kind of exists as a means to engage what most people would consider an untapped market on a college campus, and you're forgotten about. So to me, it's about creating a home on campus, creating a community on campus, and like Sergio said, without the students, esports is nothing.
So what I hear is that for some of these esports programs, there has to already be an interest, right? And that interest starts off with students. I think, especially from my angle as a researcher, one of the barriers that I've noticed is how do you get, someone to support this initiative, right? Esports programs can be housed under just it's like, what do you call it? Like student groups, like activities, right? Mm-hmm. And then if it's serious enough, then an athletics department may pick it up, right? So for you all at your previous institutions, did it start off that way where it was a student organization, or did the university say, you know what, I believe in this, let's actually put some money behind it?
Yeah, sure. So we know this from existing for the last few years in the world of collegiate esports. It's vastly different across the board, what the buy-ins are, what it means to different colleges, what it can provide to the different students. And I think largely it's based off of what the students want to see. It's a combination of what leaders want to see, students want to see, and administration wants to see, right? I know at Mississippi State, it's largely competition, right? At Ole Miss, it's largely competition because that's what the SEC cares about, right? For me at GCU, it's about recruiting students. For Sergio, it's about engaging students, right? And he'll obviously speak to that too, but different things matter on different college campuses, and I think the reason why people get into esports or why they consider esports is because it helps them accomplish different goals on a college campus, right? So esports clubs and programs can vary vastly across the board. You would think that Sergio and I, being esports college directors, have similar jobs, but our jobs are a lot different. Our scopes are a lot different. The things that his administrative board and my administrative board value are completely different. So I think it's important to understand that when you're kind of approaching college esports and what it can offer to not only students, but even the administrators and folks who are involved at the higher level on a college campus.
I think for me, one of the things I always think about, and I really want to get rid of the notion for Scholastic Esports that we have to be, our end goal has to be an athletics department, right? Because realistically, I've been in a university that had esports and athletics and we were neglected. People, we were given less scholarship money to give out to students and things of that nature. These athletic departments do not care about esports, and they won't until it's profitable, right? And so for me, being at UMD right now, our primary focus, much like Jay said, is student engagement, right? And that's what gets our administrators moving, is students, getting job placement within esports, students taking internships during the summer, students coming out to in-person events, us engaging, with clubs and watching them spring up and supporting them. And so, for the most part, a lot of it is just student engagement. It's been that way pretty much at every university I've been at. And so, like I said, I really just want to clear up and get rid of the notion that we should be aiming for athletics, because that's not always the best home for us and where we're going to be supported the most.
Thank you, and this is a great segue to the first question, right? What are some of the reasons colleges and universities have become so enthused with esports programs? Like, what are some of the reasons that you've come across where they basically say, okay, we're ready to take this seriously? Why are they taking this seriously, and kind of like, why now?
I think for me, so I like Jay said before, I think it just depends on the institution realistically, right? I know when I ended up coming from my school at Ole Miss, I went to a school in the Midwest and worked as a collegiate director there for a few years. And I remember during that time, they brought me in and they said, hey, COVID just hit. We need a way to get students in seats. We need a way to boost enrollment. We need you to get kids in here on scholarship as best as you can, right? That was my goal. Every single day I sat down, I have recruitment meetings laid out. If I didn't have recruitment meetings, it was like I didn't know what to do, because that was all that was instilled in me was you need to bring people to this institution that otherwise wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the scholarship you're giving them for esports. And so within that time, right, a lot of it, they didn't care how we competed. They didn't care how my students felt supported. They didn't care, whether students were even dropping out because of not being able to afford, going to that school anymore. And so I think, within that, the biggest thing that I see is we have to show people the different sects of what esports can do for students, right? Every student doesn't want to come in and be the best Overwatch player, doesn't want to be the best Valorant player, whatever title you're thinking of, right? But I think I've seen so many students get, just so enthused about doing the smallest things or even changing the trajectory of what they're doing in college because of esports. I think a perfect example is we had a young lady come into our program last year. She had never done observing before. For those that don't know, observing is the people that control the camera for what we see through esports events. Very simple, seemingly simple task, right, but very important for esports broadcast. She came in, she told me, hey coach, I kind of want to do this job just to make some extra money. Don't really want to do anything with it. And she ended up, jumping on board with us. She now goes to Cornell University, but is doing game changers for Valorant, doing observing with them, and also doing calling all heroes with Overwatch and their version of game chambers right now. And so her entire trajectory changed, much to her parents' dismay, unfortunately. But her entire career trajectory changed within that moment. And I think that's what's so valuable about what it is that we do, is that everybody doesn't have to be the best gamer or the best competitor ever, and we can still find a home for those students and enrich them through that.
Yeah, so to follow up on Sergio's words, I would say that the biggest reason that I see a lot of universities like Grand Canyon or UCLA or UCI get involved with esports and college esports is because it's a means for them to compete with schools like Ole Miss and Mississippi State in ways that they couldn't before, right? So where they may not be able to compete in the engineering programs, they may not be able to compete in the football, baseball, basketball programs, right? They absolutely can compete in the realm of esports because right now we're all on kind of an even playing field. It's the very beginning, right? So there's no Nick Saban standard to keep up with in the world of college football like there is in the world of college esports, right? So right now, schools like GCU get involved because we have a chance to compete with a powerhouse like Maryland right now. We have a realm to compete with a powerhouse like Mississippi State and Ole Miss. So I've seen a lot of universities getting involved because it's almost a really small potatoes way to compete with some of the big dogs without taking out billions of dollars worth of plans to maybe at the end of it still be number two, in the world of college football, baseball, basketball. So that's what I would say.
Okay, so take us through the steps, because I also believe that this is something that not even us researchers actually have a full grasp and understanding. So how does one even be a part of an esports program? Is it something that's like a part of the admissions process and you just click a button, say I want to do esports? Or you have to start your freshman year out and then they seek you out? How does this all work?
I think it kind of depends on which section you end up existing in, right? So if we start with competition, I think a lot of people have one of two ways, right? You either go through the walk-on process where you get into a college campus, you figure out that there are some kind of tryouts, you show up and you make the team or not, right? Or for some of our higher level recruits and higher profile recruits, we find them online as high school sophomores, juniors, and seniors, right? We pluck them, we put them through a trial process, and then they're a commit to one of our classes, right, to play on our competitive teams for scholarships. So that's how we do it. And then past that, we kind of offer the same things for all of our paid positions, kind of like Sergio was talking about. We exist as a means to not have to do what I did. For those of you who don't know, I dropped out of school when I went to Mississippi State for 2 years and eventually got lucky enough to where I found my way back working in the world of scholastic esports. A lot of people don't get lucky enough to have things like that, and typically college students are put in a position to choose their piece of paper or choose career experience, right? We exist at GCU Esports to not put students in that position to have to make that hard decision of piece of paper or experience. So for those students who aren't necessarily looking to become the best Valorant player, the best Overwatch player, the best competitive player, we offer the same things for them on the paid side too. So I do calls with high schoolers who at this point continuously and more and more day in and day out impress me with the way that they think about their futures. I have weekly conversation with high schoolers who know that they want to have a career in esports and have already become high school esports presidents and have already done competitive teamwork and have already considered what esports organizations or game development companies they want to work for, right? So we offer the same things to them. If you care enough to email me and sit down and have a conversation about what you want your future to be, we'll set you up in the same way we'd set up a recruit. You want to show up on campus and show us how passionate you are, we'll set you up in the same way that we would somebody who's walking on, right? So we have the same thing on either side. We'll either recruit you if you care enough to reach out, or we'll take you as you are once you show up on campus and tell us that you're interested.
I think to add to that, two ways that I would say, or two things that have changed across our landscape, I think within the last few years. Number one is the inclusion of recruitment hubs for students. When I was in school and when Jay was in school, we did not have a chance to be recruited through a recruitment hub. So much like you see in traditional sports, right? You have entities like Stay Plugged In, entities like Vanta Leagues, right, that are giving students the opportunity to showcase their talents in different showcases, go to in-person events with collegiate directors to be able to get recruited directly. I think the second thing is I don't see a lot of students advertising themselves well, right? They're in high school, they know they want to go to college, they know they want to be recruited, but then you ask them, hey, where's your Twitter account, or do you have a YouTube account, anything of that nature, right? As directors, we can only recruit you based on what we see. So if you say that, hey, I'm a top 500 Overwatch player, but there's also this other top 500 Overwatch player here who's uploading clips on a regular basis, who's networking and going to local events and things of that nature, of course, I'm probably going to have to take that player over you at that point. So I think a lot of it is we have to break the stigma of parents, right, saying like, oh, get off that game and things of that nature, right, because a lot of these students need this to be able to market themselves to collegiate directors like that, to even be able to capitalize on those opportunities at the end of the day that we can provide. So I would say those two things. I think recruitment hubs are super valuable right now, and there's a lot of entities doing a very good job, but I also think that a lot of it is on students, and we have to make sure we're equipping students and having them understand the different, even free resources that are open to them to be able to showcase their talents on different social avenues.
So what I So what I hear is there's a recruitment effort, right, from universities. So you all seek out students. Mm-hmm. Then I also hear that students need to basically have a resume for their own selves if they reach out to you.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, and I'm even going to jump in and liken it to traditional sports, right? I know even for us growing up playing ball, right, it seems like when coaches come to you and say, hey, not only do you need to be great on the field and have all 5 tools in the world of baseball, right, but you also need to have a good social media rep, and you also need to be known well in your community as somebody who takes care of folks and shows up when they don't have to, right? First one in, last one out, stuff like that. Now that we're in the world of collegiate esports, I understand more why coaches would come up to us and say those things, why athletic directors would kind of let us in on that information, because when you're a student who's good at Valorant, right, you're no different than the hundreds of students that we get emails from on a day-to-day and that we see on a day-to-day on these recruitment hubs, right? So being able to differentiate yourself with whether it's a social media presence or a community presence or a local presence, that makes a difference, right? Because at this point, there's millions of people who are great at Valorant in the world. We don't just get emails from kids in our local or region, right? I get emails from kids in Brazil who want an opportunity to play collegiate Valorant and are willing to kind of put their lives on pause to come seek out a $2,500 scholarship, right? So there's a huge differentiating factor between folks who maybe can have an impact in their community, whether it's online or local, and folks who are just focused on playing in the video game. So I would say we've kind of gotten a different perspective now that we're on the other side of it as young administrators.
Okay. Now, this is the part of the program that I'm going to diverge because now I have questions my own self. So level with me. How viable is this, right? So you have students coming in, being a part of these esports programs, and want to be a part of the industry. Is the industry ready for them? Will there be an industry for them to even get into after they graduate? I mean, the Overwatch League, didn't they recently dissolve their entire program? Right? So if you have a big entity such as that being dissolved, I mean, who's to say that your league of the world won't also dissolve the world championship? So is there a mechanism that you all have between your programs to ensure that students have basically job placement somewhere else, even if it's, non-esports?
Yeah, I think for us it's transferable skills, right? We talked a little bit about how both of our programs have a student workforce within them. So making sure that, even in our very specific areas, such as our casters, right, for our different games, working with our broadcast lead to make sure that they're actually, getting experience not only working with us in our streams, but also elsewhere if they want to, hosting different events, commentating different events, right? All things that immediately for us we think esports, but are super easily transferable to to any other entertainment business or industry that there is. And so I think, we be doing a disservice, just like I feel like anybody would be, to tell these students 100% bank on esports. That's the only thing you should bank on. There's no other avenue you should try and look at. Of course, I want them to. I love when students come up to me and say, I want to do, this in esports, or I want to work in this area. If anything, that brings me more joy than the students to say, hey, I want to go pro, right? Because I love seeing people that want to get into this industry. But I think we have a responsibility working in Scholastic to make sure that we're not letting them put all those eggs in one basket, and that they're learning transferable skills while they're with us to be able to go forth and do so.
Yeah, so I definitely agree. I think to tell students, their parents, their families, and even our administrators that esports is one-to-one the answer for them would be wrong. I think Sergio and I are lucky to have a career in this space that we call gaming and esports, right? And if we lost these positions that we have right now, it might take us some time to find our way back to them, just because these are finite positions that we're holding right now. So to tell our students who are gaining experience in the same way that we created for ourselves as students, to tell them that by doing this they're going to find a job, I think is wrong, because they might, and that might work out for them, and we can help them in all the ways that are in our power. But like I've said before, Sergio and I are lucky to be in these positions. So I think to tell our students that they're going to 100% find their way in their positions would be a lie. But I 100% agree with what Sergio says, and it's why I think esports is a good thing, because I love esports. This is what I want to do. But like you said with his observers, we have a ton of kids who they're interested in broadcast, they're interested in streaming, but they don't want to do esports for the rest of their lives, right? Some of them do, and they likely will find their way there with the transferable skills that we're giving them, right? But a lot of these students are going to go off and work for ESPN. They're going to go off and work for maybe their local news or media outlet, right? So for us, it's about transferable skills, because there's a small number of jobs in gaming and esports, and they dissolve, it seems like, every day right now. So we don't necessarily tell the story of, hey, we're going to get you into GCU Esports and you're going to have a career in esports the day that you graduate. But we do tell the students that you're going to gain experience here, you're going to know what you're talking about in the world of gaming and esports, so much so that you might have a chance to get an opportunity in the world. But if not, maybe you go work in traditional sports, maybe you work in traditional entertainment or media, and then you get to come back one day when the door's open for you, or when there's more opportunity, right? So that's the way that we handle it on our campus, and it's actually, I'm jumping into the way that we approach our whole program. That's one of the reasons why we don't offer full rides at GCU. It's a conversation we have every single year. But right now, I think that offering students a full ride puts everybody, the same folks I mentioned earlier, parents, students, teachers, administrators, everybody across the board, it puts them under a false pretense of what they can expect after, right? Joe Burrow goes to LSU and plays football there on a full ride. Mom and dad rightfully think that he might go to the NFL, right? Because that's what happens for people who have full ride scholarships in the world of college athletics and college sports, right? That's not what happens in the world of college esports right now. And I think to hand an 18-year-old and their family $50,000 to go to GCU or Maryland, right, might put them under the idea of, oh, they're going to be like Ninja. Or, oh, they're going to be like Joe Burrow, right? And I don't think that's true. We all know that not to be the case, right? There's only one or two Medios, Aframoos, and folks like that out there, right? So I think to not only to tell them about the jobs that exist that don't in the world of gaming and esports right now, but to also maybe offer them opportunities that put them under a false pretense are both wrong. And I think it's important to help the students work in what they want to, but also help them understand that there's a reality to this world that we live in the world of gaming and esports.
So the word that comes up for me is transparency, right? Just being honest with the student and also the parent or guardian of said student, right? Letting them know that, yes, you're going to be a part of this program, but this program is not built on a foundation of securing you're going to go straight into esports job right afterwards, but it's about making sure that they have transferable skills that they can apply to a wide variety of industries. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely.
Now, you both are in academic institutions, one being a very, very large one, My question is, especially in today's political climate, as DEI initiatives, right, of all forms in all industries, basically the overturning of affirmative action, how do you all respond to that? Like, how do you all ensure that you have a diverse range of students, right? And I'm not just talking about racial diversity, right? I'm talking about making sure that there's students from different trajectories in their own scholastic endeavors, students from different cities, different counties, right, different states, all have a shot of being a part of this esports program.
I think one beautiful thing about Scholastic Esports is the fact that most of the things that we compete in, most of the events that we can go to, also include students of different spaces where they're at in their educational careers. Right, we have plenty of grad students within our program, whether they be working for us, and we have a few grad students that are playing for us still to this day. I also think that. When you're looking at the makeup of different programs, I think for me, it's just about intentionality. One of the first things we talk about when it comes to, semesterly meetings or yearly meetings with our players and our staff is the importance of diversity in our program and what that looks like. Also making sure that the small stuff down to Discord messages that we see that might not be, what they need to be when we house, such diverse people within our program, making sure we're adamant about that. I also think on our end, it's about fighting for that stuff as coaches and directors, right? I think a perfect example, we were told when we made the University of Maryland program by my big boss, hey, you have 5 teams until we say you can have more, and that's it. So this past semester, Jay and a few other colleagues of ours across the industry started putting out leagues for marginalized genders, much like, Game Changers and much like Calling All Heroes and Overwatch. And I saw that and I was like, man, I really want to have teams for this. There's no reason why we can't have, teams full of women, teams full of non-binary individuals, right, competing and really getting to take advantage of some cool opportunities. And so we fought, for weeks this past semester to officially adopt not 1 but 2 Game Changers teams into our program, right? And putting them at the forefront, one of them winning an NECC championship even this previous semester, right? And so I think with that, just being really apparent and adamant about that kind of stuff, right? And not waiting for, your supervisors to say, oh, it's okay to be diverse. It's okay to implement these DEI things, right? And slowly building to that point just naturally, to the point where it doesn't seem like it's, and I definitely think there's a lot of performative diversity, but we could talk about that in Scholastic, but I won't touch on that yet. But there's a lot of performative stuff that happens too, right? Or a lot of people that say, oh, I believe in diversity, equity, and inclusion, but you look at their program and it's far from that, right? There's no even drop of diversity within it. So I think just really being adamant, really being forceful with it as much as you can within the scope of our jobs, because we want to keep our jobs at the end of the day. But, really just making sure that we are being the change that we want to see, as corny as that sounds, right? And going to our higher ups, going to our students and having those difficult conversations, leaving an open door so students feel like they can come to you with different things that, vary depending on how diverse that group is super important. I think very, very valuable. And the last thing I'll say is I think, if your esports program isn't diverse, you're setting your students up for absolute failure, because the industry itself is becoming more and more diverse no matter where they want to go to join it.
Yeah, so I'd say something that puzzles a lot of people in the world of higher academics, right, is the inability or lack of willingness to listen to students, right? And I think when you're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that's where you have to start. You have to be willing to listen to your students. I know that's how it started for us at GCU. When I got to GCU, we had 99% straight white males in our program, right? So much so that the first ever Valorant tryout that I held, we only had 1 woman try out, and she was the only woman who tried out for any of our competitive teams. We have 5 scholarship teams, 32 spots that we try out for, over 500 kids that try out every single semester. 1 woman tried out and signed up. She kind of asked at some point to have a conversation with me about how much that sucked, how uncomfortable it was, how it probably was a reason why we don't see a ton of women in our space to begin with, right? So I think you have to start there. You have to start with listening. After you listen, I think you have to be willing to look at yourself in the mirror. And once you're looking at yourself in the mirror, you have to be willing to be wrong and understand that you have to change something, right? So for us, you look around and you realize, oh, wow, there's only guys in here. Why, right? It has to be our culture. It has to be our environment. It has to be the things that we're doing, whether it's purposeful or not, right? So once we do that, once we look at ourselves in the mirror, we start to make some of those changes. And really what that meant for us is creating space for women, right? And I think that's what it looks like across the board for all different marginalized groups, right? So for us, we create the space, we educate people on why the space is necessary, and then we integrate, right? So that's kind of the way that we handle it on our campus. And the reason why it works for us is one of the same reasons that Sergio was saying, is because we're willing to have the hard conversations, right? We've done all the hard work at the beginning of listening, looking at ourselves in the mirror and then being honest with ourselves about the things that we need to do. So once we get to kind of the end, it's not hard to have the hard conversations about why these things are necessary or why we need to keep doing these things. And I agree with what Sergio says about, being the change, but it's not hard to be the change when you are the change, right? When you're young black men running college esports programs, it's not hard to naturally think about the ways that maybe you were kept out of the room, right? Maybe some of the people that you would know would normally be kept out of the room, right? Maybe pushing a little bit harder for some of those folks who normally would have been cut because of one small mistake, right? And I know that happens. I won't call our students out by name right now, but we have a lot of those students, right, who come from environments that I'm familiar with because of my friends or because of environments that the people I came from or people I know came from, right? And maybe some of the shortcomings that people would call them that they have in the corporate environment, right? And maybe some of the lack of grace that they would extend to them because of their shortcomings or because of their background, right? And so being who we are and coming from the places that we do, right, it's not hard to extend an olive branch to students like that and maybe slow other teammates down or maybe slow executives or administration down over maybe flipping the bill on a kid too soon because they made a mistake that they're not comfortable with or they don't normally see or they don't understand, right? So we're here to be the change, but it's not hard to create that change when you are the change, right? So I think it's pretty natural for us, and that's the way that we handle diversity, equity, and inclusion on our campus.
And I also think it's very important, and we'd be remiss not to remember that innately, right, esports and gaming is a space that has historically been misogynistic, has historically been racist, has historically been homophobic, right? So it's not up to those people that are being marginalized through these things to come to us and say, hey, I want to join esports. We have to actively seek these people out. If they're not feeling like they're wanted in certain spaces automatically as soon as they, were to step into an esports club meeting or whatever the case may be, right? It's our job to really make that space what it needs to be. And I think that comes from, not having complacency, right? When you see something, say something, whether it be through Discord, whatever the case may be. And then just making sure that we're creating space for people that are marginalized. Because like I said, this is a space that I think we'd be lying to ourselves if we said didn't have its own share of issues. And so it's up to us to make sure we change that for those people that want to come on board and make this industry as great as we all know it can be.
So what I hear is about being intentional about its purpose. So that means making sure that you have the foresight that, hey, diversity is not something that I'm going to wait for higher administration to somehow approve me for. I'm just going to do it because, right thing to do, but it's also purposeful to making sure that our students understand that the world is way bigger than them. Mm-hmm. And so with that said, how do you ensure your students make it out on the other side? I'm talking about they come in, they're part of the esports program, but how do you ensure that there's a high rate of graduation, right? Part of my concern about esports programs is thinking about the students who get accepted, right? If esports programs, if this is part of the mission, is about giving opportunities to students of marginalized identities, an opportunity to come to college and also have some of that college tuition, subsidized or supplemented through this scholarship, how do we ensure that those students have that opportunity in the first place? And then once they get there, are there things in place that you all implement to make sure that they get out on the other side? So if the grade's starting to look funny, around sophomore year, is that a conversation that you broker with them? And if so, how do those conversations go?
Yeah, I think it's like everything else we do on our campus, right? I think it starts with listening, right? I think every student's different, their backgrounds are different, their problems are different, right? So I think it starts with listening, and then a lot of the things that we see in esports, I'll say, most of the time especially with our athletes, is a lack of emphasis on their mental and physical health, especially for esports kids, right? I grew up playing video games, I grew up eating Cheetos and slamming energy drinks, until 2 o'clock in the morning, thinking that was going to help me play better, and then you wake up the next day dried out, tired, wondering why you can't get going like you were the night before, right? And so helping our students understand that the things that they put into their body matter, right? The way that they take care of their body matters. The way that they talk to themselves matters. The care that they take of their brain matters, right? And I would say placing an emphasis on that has made a world of difference for a lot of our athletes. Like I know one of our Rocket League players, Grant, has been struggling with leaving school. He's been talking about going back to Minnesota, maybe even dropping out of college, right? Just because he's kind of lost on where he wants to go and what he wants to do. The gym has helped him a lot. Therapy on campus has helped him a lot. These are things that we actually kind of we recommend, because of our partnership with FitGamer, that's something that they've kind of helped us place an emphasis on with a lot of their curriculums, right? So it's something that he's been open to because of FitGamer. It's something that's helped him a lot. And we actually just had a conversation 2 weeks ago about how he doesn't want to leave anymore, and how he's been in the gym for 3 months. He's been going to therapy, right? He wants to continue journaling and meditating, and all these things are making him feel better about the light at the end of the tunnel, right? Maybe graduating at the end of the day. And not only does that start with the emphasis on mental and physical health, but it's also because he feels like he can come to me, my coaches, our staff, even maybe our student leaders, right, and talk to somebody and be heard, So that's what I would say is it's a emphasis on mental and physical health, and then also listening to students in a way that makes them feel heard, which is not common on a college campus.
I think piggybacking off of that, I agree that the holistic approach is probably the most important, I would say. I think looking at just the success rates of our students that I know are, working out consistently, are, going to maybe extra office hours and tutoring and things like that. It's like night and day, right, in terms of comparison. I also think that when you're looking at grades and students graduating, a lot of it is giving these esports students a village, right? They're coming from, places where realistically a lot of us are introverted, right? We're not going to actively seek out different communities and things to be a part of. And it's easy to join an esports program and still not have it be a village, right? I think we see it all the time with how many transfers and things of that nature come out of collegiate esports, right?
Shout out to Ryan for slowing that down.
But making sure that when that kind of stuff happens, I think our Overwatch team is a perfect example, right? There's some people on our team that previously weren't working out consistently or didn't had gym anxiety, but once they got together as a group and as a team, now they are going. They're sending us pictures to post on socials of them all being at the gym together and things like that. So I think creating a village for these students to be able to not only be around people that are like-minded with them in game, but also that are going to excel them and push them as to who they are out of game is very, very important. So you just back to creating those communities and those villages is a really, really big piece of ensuring success.
Okay. And for this last question, I put challenges and barriers, but honestly, I'm more interested now about some of the solutions that you all have, right? So I think we can think about like some of the challenges, not only in terms of getting into the program, but then sustaining a student, but also about some of the things that you all have implemented. And you touched on some of these, right? Therapeutic services, right? Making sure that your body is safe and healthy in all those ways. So what are some of the other kinds of solutions that you can think of, and probably success stories? Like, can you name or mention a few stories about students who have made it out of your program and where they're at now?
I think my favorite one that I like to tell, probably one of my favorite students I've ever worked with, and I think overall the solution to me is parent engagement. I think a lot of times as directors, our jobs are student focused, right? Student centered. And so a lot of times, especially in a digital environment, we're not talking to the parents, like we're not able to engage parents on a regular basis through email or even calling them unless they're actively making an effort to do so, or we're actively making an effort to do so. And so I remember one of my favorite students I've ever worked with, young lady from India. I was watching an international Game Changers tournament for Valorant. Had never seen this girl play before, but was watching her. She was representing India at the time. And I was like, man, I really want to diversify this space, this program. And I think this girl is a very, very good space to start. I ended up, talking to her. I DM'd her on Twitter and was like, hey, I'm a collegiate esports director. We might have a scholarship opportunity for you. Have you ever thought about coming to the U.S. to get your education? So I got on a Zoom call with her at first. She was freaking out. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this. I can't believe I'm getting a scholarship for this to go to the States. And then the next week, I got on a call after fighting with my administration for that whole week to ensure that I could get her a full tuition scholarship to go to the school. This was the only way she could make it work financially. It was COVID, and COVID hit us in the U.S. hard, so obviously overseas, in a lot of places, it was even worse. Her parents weren't well off at all. She didn't know how she was going to be able to make it work, and so we fought to get her a full tuition scholarship. I got on a call with her father to let the family know that she'd be moving to the U.S. and, we need to start making preparations. And her father just breaks down crying and says, I've always wanted to send my little girl to the United States to get her education, and you just made that possible, right? To this day, one of my absolute favorite moments I think I've ever had within this job, right? And to me, what that always says is if we can get parents to believe in what we're doing and get parents to believe that their students are doing something productive, right, and it's something that's going to enrich their future, our jobs become so much easier, right? I think a lot of the barriers and legislation, that we face comes from parents just simply not knowing and not believing in this industry, right? So if we're honest and we're transparent, like we said earlier, about what's going on, right, the positives and the negatives about this industry and what it is, we're overall just going to create a better and more transparent environment for students that do grow up and want to go to college to compete in esports, or do grow up and want to have a career in esports. And so I think parent engagement is so important. And I wish more parents and more directors like us were involved in engaging parents and meeting them where they're at.
Yeah, so piggybacking off of that exact statement and kind of rewinding to 2019 when I was with Coke and working with Coke Gaming and TESPA, I learned from Alex Williams and Coca-Cola two big things. Coke's one of their big marketing mottos is meeting people where they are, right? And one of Alex's biggest approaches, and I would say, successful approaches for gaming and esports, is that gaming is really about all the cultural touch points that it provides, right? To different people, to different things. Sure, we have video games, but we also have music. We also have art. We also have anime. Those things bleed into fashion. We have shoes. We have clothing, right? There's a lot of different things about gaming and esports that attach us to other industries or attach us to other verticals that might allow us to engage more people, right? And I think if you let go of what you believe gaming and esports to be to yourself, it opens the door to what you can provide to other people, right? So if you think about it real narrow and it's only competition, you're locking out a whole group of people who maybe cosplay, right? And if you think about only cosplay, then you're locking out a whole group of people who maybe want to compete, right? And so on and so forth. So I think one of the biggest things that you can do in the world of gaming and esports is think about it as a mechanism, right? It's not just playing video games. It's not just competing with your friends or with a high level group of folks, right? It's a mechanism or a means to engage a community, maybe recruit higher on a college campus, right? Maybe make friends on a college campus, teach you social skills, teach you professional skills. It can be a lot of different things. But I think if you're willing to meet people where they are, and you're also willing to think of gaming as a mechanism, then it can provide you with a lot more flexible solutions than maybe you have right now.
Okay, thank you. Looking at the time, so I think this is a good opportunity to switch right into Q&A. Now, I love you all. Really, really appreciate you all for being here. You all have very interesting life stories. I know you do. However, there's so many of you all, I need you to distill all of that into a question. Okay? Can you do that for me? Fantastic. All right. Yes.
Of course. Thank you for being here.
In terms of esports, do you feel like it's a missed opportunity in terms of them focusing primarily on just the entertainment aspect? Because if you look at esports, it's based around gaming. Gaming is software design, game design. I don't feel like enough of that is understood in terms of like delving into how to be like a great STEM opportunity. Because if you're playing games all the time, it's like goes into like the English institutes, like testing and the debugging goes into it. So when you talk about the transparency, like you said, you think about an athletic sport, and most people like doing sports in essentiality, but you have software development, you have game design, you have a lot of aspects. Do you feel like the academics are being like the news being threaded the proper way to expand the possibilities in the area?
I think it depends on where you go. I know on our campus, the answer is yes, right? We talk about on our campus, especially with our College of Technology, Engineering and Technology, we talk about gaming and esports as a gateway drug. Right, so maybe Johnny at home loves playing Fortnite, right? We'll bring him in on that, right? Hey, Johnny, come with us. Come to GCU Esports. We'll put you on a team. We'll give you a scholarship, right? But we're gonna sign you up for computer science, and you're gonna start on that program, right? And then maybe after year one, after he's kind of he's done being enamored with the college life, he's done playing Fortnite 40 hours a week, right? He's starting to think about what's next. Maybe during that year, we're talking about sliding him a job, or maybe we're talking about applying for internships with the College of Engineering and Technology, right? So we think of it as a gateway drug, because if he's doing that, right, if he's working in those internships in year 2 and 3, then in year 4 he's thinking about what his capstone is, right? And he's thinking about what companies he wants to work for after that, right? And it's because he got involved with Fortnite when he was an 18-year-old, right? So that's the way that we think about it. It kind of goes back to the thing we were talking about earlier with being wrong and how you handle the conversations, right? I think if you're not handling it that way, you're wrong, because I think it's not just about the opportunities that exist within gaming and esports and those transferable skills, but also how you can use gaming and esports as a mechanism to a means for your future, right? Or as a means for your future. So
Yeah, I think for us, a lot of it is academic partnerships, right? So understanding that there's so much, so many different avenues that we can take, like you just said, right? And implement esports, get people ingrained, and thus enhance what we're doing. It's a symbiotic relationship, right? I think a perfect example for us is two different ones that we have. So we recently partnered with the iSchool on campus, our data analytics department at UMD, and we have students that are doing literal capstone projects about getting esports analytics and what that looks like, right? Another example is the College of Journalism, right? If it wasn't for the College of Journalism, we probably wouldn't have launched our broadcasting department or our streams so far, right? We were able to build a student base around getting them experience, right? That made it easier for me to be able to go to my administration and say, hey, I need funds to pay these students because they're working in the journalism department right now, and doing broadcasts, which is something we didn't have before. So I think a lot of it is so symbiotic, and I do agree with you. I wish more people were looking at those different avenues because especially on huge campuses like UMD, like the academic departments are there, right? But they don't always know that esports exist on their campus to go forth with it, right? So I always tell people, whenever you're trying to start a scholastic program, whether it be K through 12 or in colleges, find the champions, the faculty that are teaching some of these courses, or not even teaching the courses themselves, but may have a little bit of overlap and interest, in those fields too.
All right, next question.
Questions.
Thank you. Okay, if no one has, yeah.
I have it should be on topic. For League of Legends specifically, recently Mark Zimmerman was announced to new policy as commissioner. His viewership has been going down, many changes locally, and that directly affects collegiate esports and League of Legends. Do you have any thoughts on hopefully Mark's going to make decent changes that hopefully help collegiate as well?
I think for those that may not know, I think a big piece of what is going to affect collegiate based on the changes that are being made, a lot of it has to do with eligibility, right? Eligibility is a very, very big issue in Scholastic right now. You have schools that are waiting until the spring to recruit 18 students. 18 of those students are already out after that semester, and maybe they got a CLOL championship. Who cares? They're not continuing their education, right? And we see that a lot across the space, even when, unfortunately, some of our top competitive teams in the space as well. So for me, I think anything that, enhances, eligibility guidelines and restrictions is good. I think we don't want to enter an era where students are entering the transfer portal every single year. We're already there, right? Like you see so many students say, I'm here this spring, I'm competing. I don't really like the school part though, so I'm going to go ahead and leave. And then they want to transfer somewhere else the next year, right? And so I'm looking forward to it. I do think there's some blanket policies within it, right? Things that might affect grad students was my first thought when I read the news. Yep. So I definitely think there's some tinkering that needs to be done, but I'm very happy that collegiate is in a space and is finally getting to a place right now where we're starting to look at more things like eligibility. Publishers are starting to care more about things like that and the overall upkeep and health of the space. So I'm excited. I definitely think there's some work to do on it, but it's very, very exciting.
Yeah, I would agree on the eligibility things. Sergio knows we talk about it at length on a couple of occasions. I'm a fan and a proponent of eligibility rules in the world of collegiate esports, largely because of what Sergio said, right? I think kids should graduate. That's what they're here for, right? And I also think that maybe if you make a decision to play professionally, it doesn't work out, you reap what you sow, right? And unfortunately, that's the case because that's the case in the world of college sports right now too. And I also think in some of those worlds, in this world of collegiate esports where it's making some of these changes, right, I think we have a real American approach in the same way that the rest of the world looks at us for, right? It's real glitz and glamour in the world of college esports, right? Full ride scholarships, and let's win the CLOL championship or the Red Bull National Championship, right? Worldwide at this point, I think. And I think those things are awesome, but at the end of the day, it's a piece of plastic sitting in somebody's room or in somebody's office. You've got 8 kids who are going somewhere else to continue their education, right? So I think eligibility rules are important. I also think it's important for us to think about some of the ways that we can change not even just the college esports realm, but the professional esports pipeline, right? I think amateur is an awesome idea, and I wish that were the case. We're finding out every single day that developers don't care about it, right? They do care about, in some small ways, though, collegiate esports. So maybe we should all collectively start thinking about how pro esports and college esports might be more synonymous than tier 2 esports and pro esports as we've known it for such a long time, right? So I think it's on all of us to think about what esports is going to turn into, because it's ever evolving like it always has been, and also to think about ways to contribute to student success that's not just about winning championships or dollars.
Dr. Gray?
Yes. Vision board time. 10 years, where are you and where is esports?
Come on now with the question. So
man.
where are you?
Where am I? I feel like I have students in here, so I have to say UMD. Woo. No.
Good job.
In all seriousness, though, I think, leaving my last position, like I talked to you all about earlier in the Midwest, was a very...
You're so sweet for being so nice to them.
It was a very tough decision for me, right? But ultimately, I made that decision because I knew I wanted to impact more students, right? I mean, I was in the middle of Kansas, private Christian school. You can imagine what that campus looked like. I walked in, was the only coach of color in the entire athletic department. It was a rough time for me. And so I knew I wanted to go somewhere that I can impact more students, but also a more diverse body of students. And I think that's where I want 10 years, where I want it to be. I don't want, seeing black esports directors like myself and Jay up here to be an anomaly. I don't want having, a full team of women on a collegiate esports team to be seen as an other, or seen as, oh, how did you do that? I don't know if I even have that many women that want to compete. And so I think for me, they lie hand in hand. I think I want to remain somewhere or go somewhere where I can impact as many students as possible, and as many diverse students as possible. But I also want to make sure that this space is a more diverse space. No matter what higher education legislation wants to get pushed through, esports to me should always be for everybody. It should always be a beacon of DEI on campuses. So I really want to make sure within 10 years that is the case.
Yeah, and I'll say... Still here is the short answer to your question, right? I'm crazy about collegiate esports. Everybody who's talked to me about it knows that. It's something that I'm never going to stop being passionate about for the same reason that Sergio just said, right? I didn't have anybody to look at. We had each other to look at as students. That's all we had to look at as 18, 19, 20-year-old kids was each other 2 hours away, right? I don't want that to be the case for my kids. I don't want that to be the case for my grandkids. I don't want that to be the case for their kids, right? So I'm going to keep being here until I feel like I can leave, and I don't see that being the case for a long time, right? Mostly because, like I said, I want to exist to be a beacon for not only students who look like me, but who come from the same places as me, right? We're from the South, right? There's not a lot of technology or technology-based opportunities in the South, right? I want to make sure that one day a kid like me who's from South Mississippi has an opportunity to go be an esports director, or go work in gaming, or go work in esports, right? And we're not even close to there yet. So still here is the answer to my question.
And I'll answer that question as well. One, being Dr. Javon Goard, man, big dreams.
Yeah,
Come on now. I got 4 more years. 4 more years. I'm right there. Dr. Gray's one of my advisees too. So we right there. And when I'm in that particular position, I hope to be part of not just the understanding of the consumptive practices around esports, but also part of the actual formation, the integration part of it, right? Like, I just don't want my work to just sit on some ethereal website, right, that unfortunately other people have to then pay for. And I get no residuals. So, you see what I'm saying? Doing all this goddamn work. I'm anywho, that's where I want to see. So I hopefully will still be in communion with the two of you, Dr. Gray, and many more people, making sure that folks of all hues, shades, and sizes are, find themselves a part of the esports program if they want to. Yes.
So what makes a game more likely to be accepted into scholastic esports?
Marketability to parents and administrators. I think one of the biggest ones that I see at UMD, and of course you're a part of that group, so we get a lot of questions
Not a
about
plant in the audience.
Oh no, but no, I think one of the biggest games that we get questions about all the time, and I think other programs do too, is Counter-Strike, right? Realistically, it's very hard for me to go and plug Counter-Strike at a high school event, right? It's hard for me to go to a principal and say, hey, we should play this game. Oh, what kind of game is it? Oh, it's a first-person shooter. Okay, what kind of vibe are we going with? Well, the two teams are called terrorists and counter-terrorists. Immediately, the whole program is in jeopardy at that point, right?
Counter-terrorists or European terrorists are brown.
Exactly.
They plan a bomb.
So
AK-47s that are hyper-realistic.
I think marketability is the biggest one, right? We have to understand that we're still in educational environments. There's still people, unfortunately, that don't understand that just because a game has realistic violence, real violence is going to come from it. And so the more we normalize esports in general, the more we support the titles that are, input, we can build to that point where we won't have that barrier of titles anymore, right? But I think initially, in order for collegiate programs to be sustainable, we have to go with the games that are going to be accepted by parents, accepted by administrators. Otherwise, we won't have a program altogether, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I would even add, I just kind of feel a little old because I feel like this is something that our generation of collegiate leaders talked about a lot. I think first you have to kind of understand the pipeline problem, right? The idea that there's not a pipeline that exists for esports kids that does for football players, right? Football kids, right? And so because of that, parents don't feel necessarily comfortable pushing their kids into this esports pipeline because there's not a little league, there's not a middle school league, there's not a high school league, there's not a college league everywhere, right? And then there's not, the place where you can go be Joe Burrow, right? Maybe one or two people in the world get to be those people, but it's not like Burrow. There's 32 of Burrow in the NFL, right? So I think it's important to understand the pipeline problem first. Then once you understand that, you understand the need to have titles that are marketable to not just college programs, but also to high school, middle school, and really young kids. We're talking, football, you get started at 5-6 years old. We're talking about starting these kids on Call of Duty or CSGO at 5-6 years old. Most parents aren't going to be okay with that, right? I probably won't be okay with that when my kids start gaming, right? I think it's that. Speaking of the same thing as CSGO with Call of Duty, Sergio founded College Call of Duty, right? I love Call of Duty. It's how I got started in the world of esports. There's something to be said, especially to administrators who don't necessarily care or understand esports and gaming. There's something to be said about guns that were made by war vets who understand them to a T, and they're so realistic that it's the same actions in the game that happens outside of the game. Then on top of that, you got arms, bloods, guts flying off, things like that happening. It's not going to happen in those worlds. But when you compare that to Smash Bros, it's a lot easier to understand maybe why this is happening versus Call of Duty or CSGO, right? And then the other thing I would say that a lot of people don't talk about in the world of college esports is developer support. One of the big games that we see right now that doesn't get a lot of press is Omega Strikers. They're building that game with the world of esports in mind, right? With the world of college esports in mind. So much so that our university's logos are in that game before Psyonix, Epic, Riot, all these other games who do have leagues and they do support us. Omega Strikers is supporting us in ways that we've never seen before in the world of college esports, right? So I think it's also important to support games and to add games to the pipeline who support us back, right? Who also want to see growth in this world of college esports, professional esports, and help us build that pipeline, right? So I think it's a three-pronged approach, and all those things are equally important.
And I always want to emphasize to students, too, that whenever you go to your esports director, your esports coach, no matter what university it is, we are not the people that want to keep you from playing your particular title. I promise you. If I could add CSGO, Smash Brothers, Power World, didn't it just come out like last night? Like all these things, like we would easily do it. But it's the administration, man. There's a lot of hurdles that we have to jump across. So when it comes to adding certain titles, it's very, very hard and takes a good bit of a process. And
I'll even add here too. I think as we were lucky that we were level-headed enough, and I'll say I was lucky because Sergio was a lot more level-headed than I was. You got to be willing to build bridges, not burn bridges on a college campus, right? Because those 70-year-old administrators don't have a reason in the world to care about what you say if you came in their office and cussed them out, right? They don't have a reason to listen to you. They don't care to. You're in and out in 2 to 4 years as far as they're concerned, right? So if you come in there, cuss them out, talk about why you should have CSGO, they don't care. That's it, right? You have to be willing to have a conversation with them and understand where they are, what their opinions are, what interests that they serve, right, and how to help them do that. Maybe it's not with CSGO, but maybe it's with Smash Brothers, right? Maybe it's with Overwatch. Maybe it's with Valorant, which is what a lot of us are playing instead of CS or Call of Duty right now, right? So I think you also have to be willing to build the bridge instead of burn the bridge, because I know right now there are a lot of programs from when we were students where student leaders burnt bridges, and now they have the money and the interest to build programs, and the presidents who bridges were burnt 5-6 years ago are not building those bridges because they were burnt 5-6 years ago by students, right? So I think you have to understand that the importance of building those bridges on those campuses, because if you burn them, they might get burnt forever, and you might cost students 10, 20, 30 years down the line an opportunity to have a real full-blown esports program on their college campus.
Right.
Okay, so be mindful of what you say and how you shake and bake throughout these college and university spaces. All right, so we're at time. So where can people find you, get connected with you if they want to know more?
For us at UMD Esports, all of our ads are Terps Esports, TERPS Esports, and that's on Twitch. We do stream on a regular basis, so feel free to catch some of our live streams during a regular season. We actually, insider for people in here, people that are local especially, the university will be building a full-fledged esports facility. We're hoping for a 2025 opening. It'll be about 5,900 square feet in the center of campus. So we really, really want to get the community involved as much as possible when that opens. So make sure to stay tuned to our socials to figure out how to come and see us.
Same for us. We're at esports_GCU everywhere. We just released actually our 3rd episode of the Passes to Perfection. If you're familiar with the world of esports, it's similar to Optics The Process, where it kind of gives you a behind-the-scenes view of who we are and what we do and kind of how we got here. The 3rd episode focuses largely on our NASCAR partnerships. We partnered with NASCAR and the Phoenix Raceway in the month of November to run a college esports Rocket League tournament. Our students ran an event, a tournament, a gamer garage space, and a broadcast, all on behalf of NASCAR and in partnership with NASCAR. Just released the episode of that on our YouTube channel. So you can catch that there, esports_GCU everywhere else, and I'm at DeShong Jason everywhere, DESHONG, there's a G at the end, JASON everywhere. You can catch me there.
And I'm Javon Goard. You can find me on X, Twitter. We'll probably name something else tomorrow. Javon on the program, Instagram at thatboyjoven as well. Again, another round of applause for Sergio Brack and Jay DeShong. Thank you all for being here.